Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the press. My name is Bill Brown. I am the Sheriff of Santa Barbara County. I'm here to give you information on the incident that occurred in Isla Vista at approximately 9:27 p.m. last night. This incident appears to be a mass murder situation. The timeline, as we've been able to put it together thus far, is as follows. At 9:27 p.m., the Sheriff's Dispatch Center received calls of multiple gunshots being fired in the Isla Vista area. We had deputies in the area on foot who also heard a number of shots being fired. The deputies began responding in the direction of the gunshots and immediately found several victims who were suffering from gunshot wounds. As they were performing first aid on those victims, they were also receiving suspect information and a vehicle description. As this was occurring, additional shots were fired and calls were received by the Sheriff's Dispatch from several areas in Isla Vista. During this initial stage, both the suspect and suspect vehicle descriptions were broadcast to those law enforcement personnel who were in the area. At 9:33 p.m., 6 minutes after the initial call was received, the suspect engaged a group of responding deputies with gunfire. The deputies returned fire, and the suspect fled in his vehicle. Seconds later, the suspect was again spotted by another deputy. Another exchange of gunfire occurred at that time. The suspect fled down Del Playa and eventually crashed into a parked vehicle. The deputies approached the crashed vehicle and determined that the suspect within that vehicle was dead from an apparent gunshot wound to the head. A handgun was recovered from within that vehicle. Although we have preliminarily identified the suspect, we are not releasing the suspect's name until a positive identification can be made. Currently, the Sheriff's Office is not looking for any additional suspects. We believe this suspect acted alone. This is still a very active investigation, and as you can imagine, a very chaotic series of crime scenes. It is still in the very early phases of the investigation. We've identified 9 separate crime scenes within the area and multiple victims who were either shot or injured as a result of, apparently as a result of the suspect's actions. 7 victims are in area hospitals being treated for gunshot wounds or for traumatic injuries. At least one of those victims has undergone surgery for life-threatening injuries. We currently have 7 confirmed dead. That includes the suspect and 6 victims. We are in the process of identifying those victims and notifying their next of kin. We have obtained and we are currently analyzing both written and videotaped evidence that suggests that this atrocity was a premeditated mass murder. The Sheriff's Office is currently interviewing multiple witnesses to these crimes, and we are asking for the public's assistance. If there's anyone who has not yet been spoken to by law enforcement authorities, we would ask if you have information about this crime or series of crimes, if you would contact the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office tip line at 805-681-4171. And I would like to acknowledge and thank those allied agencies who are currently assisting us in this investigation, in addition to patrol and investigative personnel from the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office. We are being assisted by the UC Santa Barbara Police Department, by the California Highway Patrol, by the Santa Barbara Police Department, by the District Attorney investigators, by the California State Parks, law enforcement personnel, and by criminalists from the Department of Justice Crime Lab. I know that this information that I'm giving you at this point is somewhat preliminary. We are going to work diligently to get you more information in detail, including the identity of the suspect and victims. The next press conference is going to be scheduled for 4 p.m. today at a location to be determined. We will notify you through our regular processes of where that press conference will be held. Two things that I just want to say in closing. The first is I want to commend the deputy sheriffs who engaged very resolutely this suspect very shortly after we were notified of this incident. There's no question in my mind at this point that their resolute actions and valor in doing so very well may have prevented further loss of life and injury. I also want to let the families of the victims know that our hearts go out to them at this tragic time, and we will be doing all that we can in the near future to try to identify the actual circumstances, the complete background information, and so forth about this horrific series of events that occurred this evening. I probably don't have much more information that I can share with you at this point, but if you do have any questions, I will try to entertain them.
Sheriff Brown, I spoke with multiple witnesses who said that they saw two people in the vehicle, both a passenger and a driver. You say you believe he'd acted alone. Any word on that other passenger?
No, we don't have any other information at this point.
Is it fair to say as of now that sheriff's gunfire killed the suspect?
We don't know that at this point.
So we don't know if the suspect is dead at all? Or?
The suspect is dead,
okay.
but we don't know if it was if he was killed by gunfire from a sheriff's deputy or if he committed suicide.
Okay.
Does the sheriff's office have a preliminary list of victims?
We're working on putting that together, but again, because of the fact that we still have next of kin notification issues and so forth, we're not going to be releasing any of that information at this point.
Sheriff, could you clarify that head wound and a self-inflicted head wound comment you made with regard to the last statement?
We don't know that it was self-inflicted, John.
He has a head wound.
He had a gunshot wound. We don't know whether it was self-inflicted or whether it was a result of return fire from the deputies.
Were any deputies hurt?
No deputies were injured.
Did the sheriff's office have a time on how long this event lasted?
From start of gunshot, reports of gunshot was 6 minutes before we engaged and 10 minutes before the last.
Yeah, it was about 10 minutes in total duration from the time we received the call. There's indications that he may have actually, there may have been some lag between the time we were called and the first shots were fired, but from the time we got the first 911 calls until the time the suspect was determined to be dead at the scene was 10 minutes.
What evidence do you have that this was likely planned?
We have videotaped evidence and we have written evidence that appears to have been completed by the suspect.
Would that videotaped evidence include the video titled Elliot Rogers' Retribution?
We're investigating to determine that at this time, but it would appear that that is connected with this crime.
How many total gunshots may have been?
We don't know. It was dozens, so we don't have an exact number at this point.
Just again to confirm, 7 dead and 7 in the hospital?
Correct. 7 dead, including the suspect. So we have 6 victims, the suspect, who are fatalities, and then we have another 7 who are in the hospital. Of the 7 in the hospital, it's a combination of people who were suffering from gunshot wounds and others who received some traumatic injuries that were apparently either secondary to what happened or may have been struck by a vehicle.
Bill, were all the fatalities dead at the scene, or did some die?
They're spread all over.
But I mean,
Isla Vista.
they didn't die at the hospital.
No, we had 2.
We've had none dead at the hospital. None of the deceased were
And can you tell us the
Yeah,
locations?
the 7 who are at the hospital are still alive, but the fatalities are spread throughout the Isla
Can you
Vista
tell us the
area.
locations of those?
Not at this time.
Okay. And can you tell us what kind of
There,
gun?
I can tell you in very generally that a lot of this occurred in the loop area of Isla Vista.
Can you tell us what kind of gun was used?
It was a handgun, semi-automatic handgun.
But you don't know.
Well, at least a semi-automatic handgun.
Is
We
that
have
the only
recovered
weapon?
a semi-automatic handgun, and we don't know if there's other weapons involved yet, but there's at least one handgun has been recovered.
Okay, and you believe, you believe that that video that was referenced is connected to this?
We're investigating that as evidence that we believe is connected to this.
The suspect, can you let us know if he's a UCSB student?
We cannot at this point.
Was he in the car the entire time? Did he ever leave the vehicle? Was he in the black BMW the entire time?
Suspect was in the vehicle at the time that the calls came in, and it appears as though he may have exited that vehicle at least once.
Did he exit the vehicle on Del Playa?
I'm not going to get into the actual specifics, John, at this point as to where and what happened. We're still putting that timeline together, and I want to make sure that we do so accurately.
Sheriff, recently you've had some incidents in Isla Vista that have required you to reevaluate the staffing out there. Was there increased staffing tonight compared to, say, a couple of months ago or 3 months ago? Was it a different type of deployment for what would be considered an average Friday night?
We would have had a deployment, what we would call a normal deployment for Isla Vista on a Friday evening, and typically those are deployments that are beefed up from our other time periods. There were a number of personnel who were in the area at the time.
Okay.
How many officers engaged the suspect?
I'm not going to release that at this point. It was multiple officers in the first shooting and a single deputy, all deputy sheriffs, multiple in the first engagement and one in the second.
Some witnesses say that there was an automatic weapon involved. Is this true?
We have recovered a semi-automatic handgun, and that would appear to be consistent with what was used in the crimes.
Sheriff Brown, this is yet another incident in Isla Vista. Lots of high-profile things have been happening, gang rapes, Steltopia riots. What's your response to seeing this mass murder in Isla Vista?
Well, it's obviously a heartbreaking situation to see this happen in a community that is an adjacent community to our world-class university. And but I think the problem with an incident like this is it's obviously the work of a madman, and it's just unfortunate that these kinds of circumstances occur, but there are very, very limited ways in which they can be prevented. And I think the fact that we had the deployment of personnel that we did in Isla Vista, the fact that they were trained to the degree that they were trained, and the fact that they resolutely engaged this suspect at the appropriate time speaks very highly of our preparation and their valor in terms of handling this horrible incident.
Do you have any suggestions for, the multiple recent problems, and then, really it's been at least 40 years of issues, goes back to the 60s for sure. As the sheriff, do you think that there's any solutions long term to the issues
I think there obviously have been and will continue to be a lot of challenges in policing Isla Vista. It's a very unique environment and presents us with very unique challenges. But I think it's really important to recognize that this type of incident could have occurred anywhere. That this is not, does not appear to be tied to the community, other than the fact that the suspect chose this location to engage and carry out this. And there's going to be a lot more information that will come out that will give a clearer picture of just how disturbed this individual was. And that's really about all I can say at this point, because we're still putting all of the pieces together. I can assure you that we will have additional information for you, and in the days and weeks to follow, there'll be a very clear picture of something that has turned out to be an all too common occurrence in our country, where someone who is obviously severely mentally disturbed resorts